After making some hauls with my truck, and but mainly after the haul of the Shaper for Adam Booth, that video or videos, his videos and my videos, I've had some viewer requests to do a walk around, a video on my truck and modifications to it, stacks, etc. So here goes. Here's a video of my truck and some of the modifications that have been made to it. Okay, so here is my truck. It's a 2011 Dodge Ram crew cab. There's some things that I've done to it, and I'll go into detail later. As you notice, most of the time there's an insignia here stating it's a Dodge Ram and what size it is, and I debadged it. I took it off, and it'll be explained in detail why I took that badge off later. But anyway, so here it is. Just a crew cab. It has an 8-foot box. Gooseneck hitch in it. Now that ball can come out. There's a lever. Hopefully you're going to be able to see that. Let me see. Yep. That orange lever back there. If I pull that lever, I can pull the ball out and flip it over so that it's flat with the truck in like slide plywood or whatever I want to in there. I have an auxiliary fuel tank in the back. I bought that tank at a farm implement auction. It actually came out of a white GMC was their fuel tank. It was a 75-gallon tank. It is a 75-gallon tank. Well, 75-gallon to the bottom of the fill neck. If you actually filled it to the top, which it would be hard to do without overflowing it, it'd probably be 85 gallon. But what I've got it done is hooked up to a solenoid valve. There's a solenoid valve in that box right there, and all I do is just flip a switch when I want to put fuel back into my main original tank on the truck. So this holds 75 gallons. The tank on the original fuel tank in the truck is supposed to hold 35 gallons. I've never ran it out to double check it, but so between the two, I've got 110 gallons. Now that's 110 gallons if you go empty. You'd always leave some fuel in it before you stop to get more fuel. So effectively 100 gallons of usable fuel in it. But anyways, that's it. I have installed airbags on the rear of it. And I will take you in the next video, take you under it and show that to you. But there's the fill Schrader valves for the airbags right there. But basically it's a stock. Well, the engine's not stock, but we'll go into that later. Stock is a 6.7 Cummins diesel. With some modifications. It's two-wheel drive, and it has a manual transmission in it, a 6-speed, it's called a G56 manual transmission in it. But basically that's it. And again, this is going to be kind of the lead-in video of a walk around the truck, and I will detail components of the truck after this: the engine, suspension, other things, stacks, engine. But anyways, I'll bring you back. Okay, so this is the overview of the engine bay on my 11 Dodge Ram. As you can see from the valve cover, it's a 6.7 Cummins. And if any of you are familiar with the later models, if this can be called a later model with it being an 11, you'll notice that there's some changes. There's a lot of cowling or skirting that's missing off the engine that was provided on a stock engine. And I will show you, take you around handheld and show you the different components that I've installed on the engine, which makes it a good towing vehicle. Okay, so I talked about some of that cowling being missing. What that original stock cowling covers up is some of the emissions components of the diesel engine. The cowling that comes over here that's on the stock engine is covering up the EGR, or exhaust gas recirculation, and what it does is it takes exhaust gas and recirculates it back into the intake horn of the diesel engine. I've eliminated that. Both the EGR and the EGR cooler have been eliminated on this thing. So that's what was underneath that cowling in there, and the EGR cooler sits along the top of the manifold, so that's missing. If you come over here, this is not the stock air intake, this is a cold air intake made by S&B, and it provides better airflow and into the turbo. It's larger airflow. Now I use oiled filters on this thing, so I have actually two filters, one filter on the truck at a time, but I have two filters so that I can clean and re-oil them so that they get swapped around instead of a conventional throwaway air filter. Mine are oiled. I can clean and oil them and change them. The other thing that you might notice is that little breather cleaner on the top. One of the things that happens on the original engine is the oil vent, or the oil vent gets recirculated back into the intake of the turbocharger, and I've eliminated that. You really don't want that oil going into the turbo vanes of the turbocharger. So what I've done is just taken and eliminated that tube and put a little filter on the top of the tube. And every once in a while I'll just clean that off when it needs to be. But I'll cut it here and then show you the turbocharger. I've changed the turbocharger. And hopefully you can see that. The turbocharger on the stock 6.7 Cummins is a variable vane turbocharger, and they're prone to failure. I wanted to increase the size of the turbocharger, so this is 62 millimeter turbo. When they grade the size of a turbo, it's the inlet port of the turbo that they're sizing. It's a Borg-Warner 300 series, so it spools a lot faster. At the time, it spooled a lot faster than the bigger turbo 400 series. Would take longer to spool the turbo. Now, that might not be the case anymore. They've improved the efficiency of the 400 series, so you might get the same spool time out of a 400 turbo series now that you got out of a 300. But anyways, it's a 62 millimeter turbo, and along with eliminating the stock turbo, I eliminated the exhaust brake. Now, it was just a matter of flow out of the exhaust of it. So I've got 5-inch straight back out of the turbo, 5-inch exhaust straight back out of the turbo with no exhaust brake. Now, do I miss it? Yeah, I kind of miss it a little bit. Really cool sound when you're downshifting, having that exhaust brake on. But again, it's a standard transmission, and I can effectively slow down by downshifting, not as rapidly as if I'd had the exhaust brake on, but I can still do it. So I kind of miss it, but I don't miss the restricted airflow or exhaust flow through it. So anyways, that cold air intake right here goes down and feeds that Borg-Warner 300 series size 62 turbo. Vastly improves for towing, pulling, hauling over the stock turbo. So part of the changing the turbo out, I swapped out the stock exhaust manifold. Got a better flow into the turbo through a new, this is a stainless steel exhaust manifold. Got a better flow out of that into the stock turbo without having to put an adapter plate between the stock exhaust manifold and the larger turbo. Would have required an adapter plate to it. So I just changed out the exhaust manifold, which has the correct adapter for the Borg-Warner 62 millimeter turbo. One of the other things that was done to it is I changed the stock intake horn. This is the intake horn comes through the intercooler or aftercooler, whatever you want to call it. From the turbo, it goes through an intercooler. It keeps the intake air temperatures down, the intercooler. That's a function of it. But the stock horn, intake horn on the Cummins is very restricted. If you remember the EGR, the existing EGR that was deleted off of it, had an adapter plate on the top of it where those exhaust gases would go into the intake manifold. So this intake horn has a much better flow, and it does have some ports on the back side of it. There's plugs on the back side of it over here if you wanted to put like water injection or meth injection into it. You could do that. Nitrous if you wanted to, I mean, whatever. But I've got the horn on there not for that, but just to increase the airflow into the cylinder. Now, I did not eliminate the grid heater. There's a grid heater in diesel, in Cummins diesel engines. They have a grid heater underneath this intake horn. So in the winter time, what it does is it just warms that initial surge of air going into the engine when you start it. Providing warm air into it helps cold weather starts. So I did not eliminate that. I left it because of where I live. We get some fairly cold weather. So I left that grid heater installed, but you can actually eliminate that grid heater if you want even more or better airflow into the intake. Okay, so the thing that allows me to facilitate with all of these changes that I made to the engine, well, I haven't made a lot of changes, just superficial changes. Like, I mean, you can do a lot of things, change injectors and springs, cam, pistons. I haven't done any of that. But one of the things that allowed me to eliminate that EGR and the diesel particulate filter on my truck is having a tuner. Now this is an H&S Mini-Max tuner. I've got 4 tunes on it. That comes with it. Now H&S is no longer in business. This is a company that kind of got sacrificed by the federal government in tuners. They took a huge fine from the federal government for producing tuners that would eliminate the emissions equipment on trucks. Now, again, they were the let's call them the sacrificial company, because they made outstanding tuners. Everybody kind of used them at the time. Just state of the art tuning, and you didn't have to screw around with it to get it to work, adapt to yours. It was just a plug and play. Now they still make tuners, but what happened is companies only make part of the tuning, so they can't be pinned for saying that my portion of the tuning eliminates the emission stuff. Is kind of how they get around it. What you have to do is get components from a couple of different companies and use them in conjunction with each other to do the same thing that what an H&S tuner would do now. And sometimes we've had a friend of mine that we've been doing that to his, and sometimes getting these two companies' components to work in conjunction with each other can be a little bit frustrating, because everybody is pointing fingers at everybody else when there's an issue. But this is why I was able to eliminate or delete the diesel particulate filter and the EGR without throwing codes onto my truck. So that's what I've got. So just an added note to the truck having a manual 6-speed transmission is that I had to change the clutch, and when you increase the horsepower of a truck, a Dodge Cummins over stock with a manual transmission, once you get to a certain horsepower, the stock clutch won't hold up anymore. It'll start slipping, and that's what happened to me. So what I did is I changed it out to a South Bend dual disc clutch. So the truck has a South Bend dual disc clutch in it. Now, it's probably been in for, I'm going to say, maybe 80,000 miles, maybe a little more than 80,000 miles, but it's not slipping, but it's starting to chirp a little bit when you start out. You get a little squeak out of it, the clutch plate when you start out, or clutch plates I should say, when you start out. Anybody that has ever had a dual disc clutch, you'll know what I'm talking about, that little chirp that you get when you let the clutch out from a dead stop. Throwout bearings rattling a little bit too, which is kind of indicative of dual disc clutches, but it's a lot worse than it was when I first got it. So at some point in time this winter, I'm probably going to change the clutch again, put another dual disc clutch in it, another South Bend dual disc clutch in it. But anyways, just so that you know, it's got a dual disc clutch in it. So I use a GPS system, and I'll explain to you why I use a GPS system in more detail in kind of a closing video. But the one that I use is GPS is Garmin, and it's branded a diesel. That's the model number of it, and I can get both truck and car out of it. Now, kind of why I use, I'll use it in truck mode while I'm pulling the trailer, because between my trailer and the truck, it's over 50 feet long. And the problem with a standard GPS or a car mode GPS is it can take you into places where it is very hard to get a trailer down through, or a long vehicle down through, or into dead-end streets where it's going to be hard to turn around and you'd have to back out. What this will do is it'll warn you, saying that you shouldn't go down that street or go down that road because it's going to be restricted to your size and weight. But anyway, so it's in truck mode right now, or I can select it into truck mode right now, and I just got it set for 13'6", which is a standard working height of a trailer, like a semi. If you go on anything over 13'6", you have to have a permit. And I got it set for 60 feet long. And just 80,000 pounds, because that's just arbitrary measurements for trucks, semis. But you can put it into a car mode and select it, and you just pick whether you want to go someplace or view the map. And it's acquiring the satellite because it hasn't been on. I didn't have it plugged in. So, but anyways, that's it. I'm using a Garmin diesel model GPS, and I think it's a 7-inch green. I'm not really sure. So this is the rear end of my truck. What I'm running Blissteen shocks on the thing, and Firestone airbags. Now, I told you in a previous video, or the truck walk around, that I had debadged the truck, and the reason why I debadged it is because the truck is only a 2500 or a 3/4 ton. Now, the reason I debadged it is because I don't want to draw attention to that it's only a 3/4 ton. And because it can haul a lot more than that. What Dodge or Chrysler says that it can haul a lot more. And the reason why I say that is the rear ends, or four-wheel drive front end also, are Dana axles in a Chrysler, and they're very well rated and very popular rear ends for vehicles. Now, this Dana rear end in this truck, a 3/4 ton truck, is the same rear end that is in a 1 ton or even a higher rated truck, 4500, 5500 Dodge trucks. It's the exact same rear end. The only thing that changes is the springs. And what I did is, instead of adding leaves to the spring, I just added airbags to it. So this rear end can support the same weight that a 1 ton or higher can support. The only thing, the limiting factor to it, is the tire rating. And what I do is I weight the trailer, not the rear end of the truck, but I do have, you're always going to end up with some weight on the rear end of the truck regardless of how you weight it, but I've got the airbags to compensate for it. So I just don't want to draw attention to it, and I've been stopped before, so nobody has ever, no cop or DOT person has ever asked me about the truck itself or the rating of the truck. Now, they could pull it. If they run the VIN number on it, they can find out that it is a 3/4 ton truck and call me out on it, but you know, why I kind of keep the truck like it is in good condition, clean, is it doesn't draw attention to you. If they see the truck with a trailer on it and it's not drooping or look like it's overloaded on the back axles, they won't even question it. So that's kind of the reason I did that. So Firestone airbags, Blissthene shocks on it. Okay, I know this isn't a very good shot, but it's hard to, it's raining outside, and without being outside when the sun's out, it's hard to show you the stack piping for my Dodge. But anyways, I have a 5-inch from the turbo back exhaust, and it comes up to the bed of the truck, and it splits into this typical Y piping that is in most pickup trucks to facilitate stacks in the back. So it comes up to a Y pipe 5-inch, and it splits out 5-inch going both ways, and then it goes out to the stacks. And what I'll do is I'll stop here and show you the stacks that it comes that it feeds. Okay, so this is a stack on it. It's a 6-inch stack. It's called a Aussie, or short for Australian, or Aussie cut. It's a mitered cut with a slight angle on it. Aussie only being the designation or kind of brand for that type of a cut. So they're black. I've always had them black. I've got a gray truck. Doesn't really have a lot of chrome on it. Doesn't have any chrome on it except for emblems. So I wanted them black to begin with, and so that's what I chose. Now I'll take you over to the other side and show you an issue with it. I've had these stacks on the truck. It's an 11, and I probably put the stacks on in 12. So I didn't even have the truck a year before I put the stacks on it. But I'll show you an issue with it. I got them black. They were powder coated black, and I bought them that way. And when I bought them, I couldn't understand why the black powder coated stacks were more expensive than the chrome ones. And I'll take you over to the other side and show you. And as you can probably see from this stack, here's what the issue was. These black powder coated stacks, what they did is they took their chrome stacks and they powder coated over the top of them, which wouldn't have been a problem if they had sanded or scuffed up the finish to adhere the powder coating to the chrome, but they didn't. It's just the chrome finish, and they just powder coated over the top of it without sanding it or anything. And I had the stacks for probably a year and a half, and I noticed this one, which is on the right hand side of the truck, started bubbling up. The powder coating started bubbling up, and I couldn't figure it out. I thought it was a defect in the powder coating, but it was way past warranty, if there even was a warranty on the stack. So make a long story short, after a couple of years it started peeling off, and that's when I noticed that they never prepped the chrome stack to accept the powder coating on it. So what I do now is I'll just take some sandpaper, and this has been an ongoing process. If you can, maybe you might be able to see. Let me point. Yeah, you can see it. What I've done is painted over it. I'll just take some sandpaper, scuff that up, and get some exhaust black exhaust type paint or heat resistant paint and paint over that. I've done it quite a bit. But anyways, there's the stacks, and again it's 5-inch from the turbo back right back to the stacks, which are 6-inch stacks. There is no muffler, there is no resonator in the system. I'm going to do a little parting clip here with the truck running, just so that you can hear it. There's a couple of things that, a point that I want to make. If you've ever seen my truck, you'll notice that it doesn't really smoke or roll coal. I can make it smoke, I can make it roll coal, but it won't do it under normal load or even pulling a heavy load unless there's a lot of strain on it. Like with Adam Shaper, I can get it to smoke if I pull a long hill, but it doesn't smoke like the old 12 valve Cummins do. I'm going to turn this off so that I can be heard. A lot of people ask me about rain, snow getting in the stacks. It does get in the stacks, it'll blow in there. The piping is lower than the turbo, so it would take an awful lot of water to fill it up before it ever got up to the turbo. But once you start it up, it just blows it out. Yeah, when it rains, you'll find black drops on the back of my truck from where it blew it out of the stacks. The other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was, and I forgot to mention it when I was talking about the cold air intake, is I have a scoop on the front of the truck down low. That is a scoop that picks up the air for the cold air intake. Now in the wintertime, living around Buffalo, as you can probably imagine, that thing will plug up with snow. But that is not the only intake to it. There is the normal air box for air intake for the Cummins from the factory is taken through a port in the fender well, and that port is still there in the S&B air intake. So if that thing does plug up with snow, it will just suck air in through the fender well. But that's it. That's my truck. That's the video. Hope you enjoy. Just throw a comment in there if you have any. Rate it, subscribe, maybe share it with a friend.